Okay, wait. Let me tell you this before I forget it. My friend talked me into going with him, right? So we went to Columbia and we were coming back and we were landing in Louisiana somewhere. This didn't make any difference to me. I just went as company.
Right.
So, okay.
Doesn't make any difference because it's all from the air, right?
Yeah, it didn't make any difference. And he says, we're going to run in here. And I said, okay. So we're approaching and we just got done smoking a big fat one. We were pretty stoned, right? We get there, boy, goddamn. He fucking dumps the flaps, crams on the brakes, and we skidded to a stop just at the edge of the runway. He goes, God damn, this is a short fucking runway. And I looked to the left and I looked to the right and I said, yeah, but it's a mighty fucking wide one.
Oh, holy crap.
I mean,
It landed on it sideways?
Long way.
Even though the light, there wasn't any lights.
Not back then.
Yeah.
Not like you're thinking in a big airport, it wasn't like that.
Right.
They had cursory lights, you turned them on with the radio. I was a kid, I was like 14.
Right.
And I befriended a one-legged drunk. Yeah, he was a nice guy, but he was always drunk and things. And that's just how he was. And they'd arrest him all the time, they'd take him to jail, right? He didn't give a fuck because he always had a bottle hidden in his carved out wooden leg right there. He'd have a bottle stashed in his leg. So, you know, he'd go to jail, his leg up, get drunk. He was laying there, he didn't care. So, but this guy was, he used to sit around and tell me these stories all the time. Nobody else would ever listen to him because he was just an old, I didn't have a whole lot of family going on at the time, so I'd sit around and listen to the old drunk. But he told me a story of when he was a kid growing up on the bottom of Mount Monadnock, which is in New Hampshire. And he lived in that little town right there. And he said that when he was a kid, he used to roam through the mountain and there was these caves and things in there. And then one day they came across all this Nazi German boxes and guns and crates and crates and crates and crates inside the mountain. And then when the kids went in to enter the mountain, all of a sudden somebody bought the property named, this was right after World War II ended, and they were called the D.D. Beanhoff family that moved in, a German family, an immigrant family, Beanhoff. And they came over and moved into town right there, and I can't think of the name of the town, but it's all right. Anyways, he said they closed it off because they used to go in through the wellhouse, through the rocks, and somehow they'd closed it all off. So they didn't go in there anymore. Well, then, come to find out, it was still World War II. It wasn't the end of World War II. I got to backtrack here a minute. World War II was still going on.
Okay.
And the Beanhoff family was already there as German immigrants before the war started.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, that was how that worked out.
All right.
So now they bought the properties and closed off the only access into the mountain ways, right? So then, let's see. During the war, before him, during the war, they had a cave on the top of the Mount Monadnock, the Germans did, and they had a railroad spotlight that they could spot 50 feet into the cave hole, where unless you were dead on the light, you wouldn't never see it. You understand what I'm saying? And they'd blink to the submarines offshore of Boston, to the U-boats.
Okay.
And one of Beanhoff's sons worked as an interpreter at Springfield Army Interpretation Base during World War II. So it all tied into me, the whole story, because I was really into World War II, and I'm listening to him, and sorry, I got really curious and started to investigate. There was the Monadnock Mountain Murders, or it was the town, I can't think of the name of the fucking town. But they wrote a book, one guy did, and it was a handwritten copy of a book. It wasn't even printed. And there was only one copy at the State Capitol Library in New Hampshire, right? And I'm going, wow. So now, the mountain had this lantern, and I did more studies. German U-boat people were found on the shore of New Hampshire a lot. The Coast Guard captured a lot of German people coming up off the fucking submarine boats. So I started reading that, I'm going, wow, that's pretty serious, but wait. So now, I get older, and I'm really curious about it.
Jaffrey and Dublin.
That's it, Jaffrey, New Hampshire.
Jaffrey, New Hampshire.
That's right. Now, the Jaffrey Murders, or the Jaffrey Murder Trials was the name of the book. But now listen to this. The Bean family Beanhoff changed their name to Bean during the war, when the war was starting up, because they wanted to distance themselves from Germany. Right, so they dropped the Hoff and became the Beans, and they opened up a match company, D.D. Bean Match Company, Jaffrey, New Hampshire. And every matchbook you look at pretty much has that, or used to have that on the stamp. It was a huge company they had there making matches. So, you know, they were embedded there. Come to find out, Jaffrey, New Hampshire's 90% Nazis. I mean, the whole town is. When I first went there and asked questions, it was like, holy fuck, I was lucky to get out of town, I felt, after I saw the eyes of these folks that I was talking to. So, you know, I figured out I better not ask any more questions here. Well, then I figured out that the mountain was high enough to be able to have, I'm an engineering student, so I figured out it was high enough that you could see all the way to Boston if the trees and the fields were there like they were back in that era. You understand what I'm saying? You could see it. Well, I read further into the history and come to find out somebody had said that they were relaying to a rooftop in Boston, and then the rooftopers were laying to the sub, which made more sense to me.
Yeah.
You know, because you could really see Boston from on Mount Monadnock, but with the trees, the way they'd grown, because back in the early days it was all fields and produce being grown and hay and whatnot. You know, now it's all houses and suburbia with big trees growing around, so you don't have the clarity of the vision, and you know, you'd have to be pretty high up on Mount Monadnock. So I started scoping around on the side of the mountain, right? And I was just looking, and you could just tell where it had been blasted over, and you know, the rock formations had totally changed, and you could just see where somebody had closed something, you know, many, many years ago. But you know, from looking at it from a builder and an engineer, I'm saying, yeah, somebody blew this here. So then, all this is tying in with me. The D.D. Beanhoffs, the D.D. Bean Match Company, the Nazis off the shore getting caught, how many made it in, you know, and what were they planning to do with all these stores up underneath the mountain. So I started reading on about the Indian folklore of that Mount Monadnock. The Indians would be chased from the settlers and the army, and they'd run into Mount Monadnock on horseback and disappear into the mountain. So the caverns in there are immense. I mean, they got to be huge if the Indians were just running in there with their horses and disappearing, so they couldn't be found, goddamn.
Well, you know, that makes sense. When I look at my grandpa and that whole set.
Okay, let me finish this story, and then, okay, just a little bit more before I don't forget it. Yeah. So now, I'm really curious. I sneak down on the Beanhoff property and go in their well house, and I look where somebody had cemented it shut many, many years ago. So now I get the maps out and I start measuring the height of the mountain and where the light would have to have been in order to shoot over everything and hit a rooftop in Boston, because back then, you know, 4 or 5 stories, 10 stories maybe in Boston. So there weren't any big buildings yet, not a whole lot of them. So, you know, I figured out the height, and I climbed back up on there, and I just started trying to paw around, right? I never got anywhere. I wanted to get in that mountain so bad just to see it, you know, and I never did. But, you know, not many people ever would know that story. And unless you went to the Concord Library at the state and read the book, The Jaffrey Murders, after World War II ended, 12 people were murdered in Jaffrey, and it's a town of like 2,000. So, you know, people knew things that people that lived there didn't want that to get out. So I'm sure that those people got murdered for a reason. You know, it wasn't just a random act of violence that never occurred ever. You know what I'm saying? So you read that, even the author of the book, which I forget whom, it was handwritten. I mean, it was never even printed or typed, the book. The Murdoch murders was really a big thing. A family of like 8 or 9 people, brothers and sisters, mothers and fathers. They had this huge hog farm. I mean, a big one, right? And then all of a sudden, everybody was just like not there, except for one sister. And, you know, everybody was asking, where's your other sister at? Oh, well, they went out of town. You know, so that roost went on for a few years before the townspeople was really doubting where the family was. And at the end, they found them all buried under the hog shed out back. One girl killed them all, boy.
Wow.
Yeah. I said, wow, wait, what the fuck?
I love it.
Gilman had quite a history, bro. I weighed the
well, it's kind of like down here in the South too. You know.
I can't remember the name.
Moonshine country.
When in Gillington, it's so old that there was actually a cellar hole where the Mays family lived that came off from one of the Mina, Pinta, or Santa Marias. That's how old New Hampshire was.
Wow.
So I got to lay in this root cellar that was all covered with thick moss.
Kidding me.
No, I got to lay right down in it, and I said, wow.
Damn.
Yeah, that was a freaky little thing right there.
Wow.
Yeah, but as I said, that Gilmanton went way back. I mean, that's where they first kind of started.
You were so blessed.
Yeah, that little
raised.
town, I was blessed to be raised in it. I mean, it was gorgeous, bro. Mountains, lakes, rivers, trout, hunting, snow, fuck.
I mean, adverse
it was just
conditions,
great.
so you had to adapt and adjust even as a kid, so it prepared you,
Well,
you know, for the next
I just
thing.
enjoyed New Hampshire's mountains and just enjoyed them from a very young age. They were a place for me to go.
Just like you.
Well,
yeah, I just roamed them, boy.
Yeah, well, the town's town of 74 people, so.
You know what I'm saying? Mine wasn't much bigger.
We're just from the 30 miles from the Canadian border.
As I said, I went to school with the same 12 kids for the first 8 years. Well, a couple kids came and left like, from the orphanage and whatnot, but other than that, there wasn't any other families moving in or moving out. We all had to walk about a mile every day one way
From
to
the bus stop to get home.
to go and to come back.
Yeah.
And the reason was the county said that because the orphanage wasn't a taxpayer, that the children would have to walk to the nearest pickup and the bus wouldn't come get them, even though there'd be several of us at times walking
But I
to
mean,
the bus
that's
stop.
even been current.
What?
Yeah, in 10-degree weather, walking to the bus stop.
But it's still that way today.
Yeah, it was crazy, Todd.
It is. It's still that way today.
Yeah, no help came to the orphanages
Poor
back then.
kids.
I mean, it was like, that's why the nuns cooked and had bake sales and sold
I'm
pies
telling you.
and breads. And
The Catholic nuns here in this country, they're the ones that really help the pregnant mothers and the babies. They're the ones.
Wow.
Todd,
I love them.
Listen to me.
They help me.
4th grade, I didn't have no shoes that fit. Yeah, none that fit. So I spent a lot of time barefooted, and after that I got a job in 5th grade, and I bought me a pair of boots. And then after that I always had another pair of boots under the bed. And I always did that forever and ever. I always had more than one pair of boots, because I knew that there was going to be times coming that you just didn't have a pair of boots. So I said, wow, okay, I learned a lesson there quick, you know. And then the old guy next door that pretty much raised me, that had the little dairy farm, right? He was right next to the orphanage and stuff, so we called him Grandpa Dave. Everybody called him Grandpa Dave, and that's what we did. We'd all hang out with Grandpa Dave and work and learn from him, and he was very smart. He was very, very smart. He had like a 6th grade education, but in high school he could help me do calculus and trigonometry. A 5th grade education, and yet he could do all that. And he wanted to be a doctor, and he would have been a damn good one, but he couldn't get any education. Gilman didn't offer it.
Yeah.
So that's how it was back then. You know, it was pretty antiquated.
Right.
I mean, at the
People
first,
with limited resources.
look, the first 6 years I went to school, 1st and 2nd was in one room, one teacher. 3rd and 4th in the next room, one teacher, all the way up to 8th grade. 4-room schoolhouse. That's how they taught. Half the day was for the 1st grade, the other half of the day was for the 2nd grade, and the 1st grade sat there and did homework. You know, that's the way it went. So, 1st grade was hard. 2nd grade was easy because you already did it. You know, you were already sitting there listening to all the class that 2nd grade did. So 2nd grade, you just kind of sat there and did nothing because you already learned it all. You know,
in the 1st grade.
Right. So third grade was hard. 4th grade was a breeze. You know, it was like straight A's.
Right.
You know, that's the way it worked. So some of the kids didn't catch on to that, though. They would sit there and goof off and do whatever.
Not pay attention.
I'd just listen and absorb it. I'd be sitting there drawing cars and stuff on a piece of math paper while I was listening. That's all I did was doodle cars. Yeah, but the only thing about a little town is, if you don't get along with somebody just a little bit, it's a little town. So that little bit of not getting along sometimes gets to be a whole lot.
The percentages add up
I
real
know,
quick.
and somebody else's, crowd kind of falls off on you, and it's like,
Well, I was a pure hellion, so everything they said was true.
Oh,
When I got that motorcycle, I was listed as Charlie Bronson. That's what they called me. Hey, Charlie, how's the bike running? That was a real fool on my bike now. I mean, there was a guy that lived in town called Kenny Witham, and he raced bikes professionally and shit. He had a Harley, and he was a real biker, right? And one day, I was on a back road, and I had a Honda 90 street bike from like the 60s. Like, it wasn't much, but it was mine. And Kenny Witham pulled up. I was going down the dirt road, and he come up behind me, right? And he goes, "You want to race?" Down the road I went. Yeah, well, I was going around the dirt roads. I didn't care if anybody was coming. We got to the end, and he pulled up, and he goes, "You ride that thing right well, son." My head went like this, my chest bowed up. I got 7 foot tall, bull, because Kenny Witham told me I was good on my bike. You couldn't blow me off a motorcycle after that. Yeah, it was like, you know, you want to do what? Sure. And everybody had dirt bikes. I had street bike. So everybody wanted to go through the mud holes and climb the mountains. And I did on a street bike. I mean, I'm just saying. I figured it out after a minute. I put a knobby on the back. I said, yeah, this motherfucker will go anywhere. Might not be as,
That's right.
not as good as what they get there, but I'll be right with you. So, and then the second bike I ever bought was a 441 Victor BSA. I was 16 when I bought that single cylinder. That motherfucker had no pressure. You know, no pressure release on it to kick it over, so if it kicked back, you were over the handlebars every time, because I was a little guy. I wasn't very big. So, and I nicknamed the bike Thumper, and I put a rabbit on it and wrote Thumper. Like a big rabbit thumping. Yeah.
that's what I nicknamed Zachary before he was born.
Then I went and got the service, and I bought a 350 Kawasaki Bighorn and sold that that big old 441. It was just awkward. It went though. I mean, once you, it was like thump 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 thump. That's how it went. I mean, it was just one piston.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a lot on 400 cc. It was like half a Harley.
Half a Harley.
Yeah, but it, you know, it just went thump 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 thump. That's why I named it Thumper. And then I came home with that Kawasaki Bighorn, and everybody was envious because they just didn't have anything like that there now. That was a pretty hot bike when they came out. 350 Kawasaki Bighorns, they were called. That was a real popular racing bike and everything. Those bikes were pretty hot.